I got nothing for this bit. Let's just go to the video.
Don't scream, yeah, it's only Halloween. Don't scream, it's only Halloween.
Hello, Internet. It is I, once again, Ghost Olin, back on another Halloween night to show you more spooky music. You know how this goes. I do this every single year. Let's waste no time. Let's just get down to it. And to kick things off, the first CDs I have for you today, I have 2 CDs by Roky Erikson.
It's the night of the vampire.
I honestly can't believe I haven't already talked about Roky in past Halloween videos. He was once a member of 13th Floor Elevator in the 60s, and eventually he went on to have a solo career under various monikers. These 2 albums were made sometime in the late 80s and are weird, psychedelic, but perfect Halloween listens, with songs like Night of the Vampire, I Walked with Zombie, and If You Had Ghosts. You know you're in for something spooky. This guy's great, total weirdo, but he made some fantastic music and some iconic music for Halloween.
I walked with the zombie last night.
Next up, I have more classics. I have the Misfits album, American Psycho. Another band who, again, I can't believe I haven't already talked about in a video before. And I could have gone with literally any album by this band because they're essentially the kings of horror punk. But I picked this one partly because of its notoriety. It's considered one of the band's worst releases because Danzig is no longer in the band at this point, but also because of its schlocky hard rock production. Their older stuff has a bit more of a raw punk edge to it, which I think is why people really like them. But at this point in their careers, they were on a major label, they probably had access to better equipment, better engineers, better producers, and they just threw together something that sounded a bit too clean. But mostly, the reason I'm sharing this album tonight is for the song Dig Up Her Bones.
Point me to the sky above. I can't get there on my own.
I absolutely love that song. It's so melodramatic and sultry, like an 80s B horror movie. But honestly, the rest of the album is just as good. Again, I love the melodrama of it, and I love how heavy and melodic it is. If you're looking for something in the cheese department, give this album a listen. Keeping on with more classics here, next up I have the Gravediggaz, 6 Feet Deep. Once again, an album that's a complete no-brainer. This is just classic horrorcore, perfect for Halloween. In fact, this is one of the groups who pioneered horrorcore. And it's a funny album because it's essentially just an outlet for the members to vent their frustration over the hip-hop industry, an industry that all of them were involved with and became disillusioned by. So they formed this group and started writing a bunch of songs with very violent and graphic yet satirical imagery, very inspired by slasher and gore films of the 80s. I actually haven't seen a CD copy of this before, which is leading me to believe that it is out of print on disc, which makes it all the more special that I'm sharing it with you on this video tonight because, again, it is the perfect album for Halloween.
Another fucking madman born to the planet, sending niggas to the pearly gates. I'm psyched out, I got screws loose like Norman Bates.
Alright, next up, I have another twofer. I have 2 CDs by the band Lycia, a great atmospheric goth rock band that I don't think gets the credit that they really deserve. When it comes to classic goth music, bands like Susie and the Banshees, Joy Division, and Bauhaus always seem to get the attention. And while valid, there were still a ton of other bands that emerged doing similar sounding music around the time that those aforementioned bands were active. Case in point, Lycia has been around since the late 80s and have put out some solid albums that fall within that realm of classic 4AD sounding bands. Bands like Cocteau Twins and Dead Can Dance. Very dark, ethereal sounding music that Peter Steele of Typo Negative said was the most depressing thing that I've ever heard in my life. These are two different albums that came out in the 90s, both very solid, that are spooky and haunting. You honestly can't go wrong with any of the band's albums for Halloween. Even their later stuff that came out in the 2010s, I think holds up pretty well. But these two are my picks and are great starts for exploring this band's discography. Next up, I have yet another classic, but we're going way back. I have Bach's piece Toccata and Fugue in D minor. Probably the most iconic music affiliated with Halloween, and really anything spooky, which is funny because I highly doubt that was Bach's intention when he composed this piece. It does have a more sinister sound, which I'd imagine is supposed to represent hell. I could buy that being more of Bach's intention. But nowadays it seems to be involved with cheesy Halloween and haunted house stuff. The first minute alone of this piece is enough to harness spooky imagery, but if you take the time to listen to the whole thing, you'll find that it's just as spooky. There is something to be said about solo organ music that is a bit unnerving to hear. The nice thing about this piece, and really classical music in general, is there's so many recorded renditions that exist on CD that if you want a CD copy for yourself, it's probably not going to cost you much to buy. So I think if you need something for your haunted house themed party or just something genuinely spooky to listen to, this is an essential piece for you to check out. Next up, we are now entering to the dark ambient portion of this video. We have the Caretaker's album, Selected Memories from the Haunted Ballroom. The Caretaker makes some of the most unnerving ambient and experimental music that I've ever heard. A lot of his stuff is just heavily manipulated recordings from the 20s and 30s, which in the right context is unnerving to listen to in general. But with the added warbles and crackles, the music takes on an extra level of creep. This is actually the Caretaker's first album, which I think is pretty underrated compared to his monolith Everywhere at the End of Time. The inspiration behind this album was to create music that was reminiscent of something you'd hear from The Shining, hence the album's title. There's a nice mixture of quieter ambient songs and noisy stuff that are all both equally disturbing to hear. And also, this is the first of 3 albums in a trilogy he calls the Haunted Ballroom Trilogy, which are all worth a listen. But to me, this is the one that's the best and the spookiest. Still staying on the topic of dark ambient, next up I have 2 different albums by 2 different artists, who I'll talk about in a sec. There is an amazing label called Cyclic Law that puts out tons of great dark ambient albums, and these are 2 prime examples of what the label offers and are probably one of the earliest dark ambient albums I'd ever been exposed to. Starting with Shrine's Somnia here, I distinctly remember stumbling across this on iTunes and being captivated by the artwork. I didn't know what exactly was happening, but seeing these giant jellyfish-looking creatures hovering above sea level was genuinely terrifying. And yet I had to know what the music on here sounded like. Which led me down a small rabbit hole of finding other similar albums. This is where I found Gustaf Hildebrand's album Starscape, which I was also attracted to by the artwork. I like outer space themed albums in general, but a scary outer space themed album sounded all the more intriguing to hear. So if you're a fan of dark ambient, drone, or spooky sounding experimental music, you absolutely should check these albums out. And honestly, just check out Cyclic Law in general. Again, everything that they put out is well worth listening to, and frankly could be a good Halloween listen. Still on the topic of dark ambient, next up I have Prurient's album, Noise for Halloween Night. This is one I'm pretty excited to have on CD. I would have talked about it in a previous Halloween video, but for a while, this was only available as a digital download, but as of fairly recently, it's now on CD. And Prurient's work in general is good Halloween music. Dark, unnerving, disturbing industrial music. In fact, I shared his Rainforest Spiritual Enslavement project in a previous Halloween video at some point. Similar sounding music, just with a slightly different thematic flavor. But this one is especially perfect for the holiday, as it takes full inspiration from classic horror movies, utilizing synths, creepy ambience, and voices like something composed by John Carpenter. I also just love Halloween-themed ambient albums in general. A lot of Halloween-themed albums are either really cheesy or meant for kids, so they're fun and silly to listen to. But the stuff that really try to utilizes the creep factor of Halloween is something that I'm really interested in. So whenever I find Halloween-themed ambient albums out there, I have to cop it. Alright, Internet, we are down to the final album I have for you tonight, and that album is Black Sabbath's famous self-titled release. When it comes to heavy metal, this is where it all began. This record allowed so many future bands to fully lean into dark and evil territory. I mean, even just looking at this eerie album art, you know you're in for something spooky. But even though this album is a certified classic, the main reason I'm also sharing it with you tonight is to pay respects to the recently deceased Ozzy Osbourne. A legendary figure and musician, the man who helped morph metal into what it is now. And truth be told, he probably also influenced a lot of those other dark ambient and generally spooky sounding albums I've talked about tonight and in previous videos too. We thank him for everything he's contributed. Rest in peace, Oz. Alrighty then, Internet, that does it for me. Thank you all so very much for once again joining me on Halloween evening. I will be back next year with even more spooky, scary music. But until then, this is Ghost Olin from What I'm Listening To signing out. Goodbye!